My name is Linda Sorkin Eisenberg, and
I'm Ellen Koentopp-vanek.
Ellen has a little laryngitis today, so I'm going to do most of the speaking. One day, Ellen and I, she was actually my neighbor, and we were talking about our artwork, and we both said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a little support group? Let's each of us invite 2 or 3 artists, and maybe they'll suggest one artist, and then we'll have a group. So we wound up with pretty much the same people. It's been 15 years, and there are 10 artists. So our main feelings were that we work in isolation with no one to offer responses to our work. In order to combat a common sense of isolation, 15 years ago, Ellen and I invited artists to come together, like I said before, to meet on a regular basis to provide honest feedback, critiques, and encouragement to each other about our artwork. The objective of the group is to be supportive and constructive and to increase exposure through group shows of our work. We decided to invite only women artists because historically, and even at that time, women had less representation than men in all the arts. Although our work has changed over the years, it remains informed by our own personal fascinations, obsessions, and experiences. While our styles range from figurative to abstract, we continue to observe, record, transform their own existence through art. Thank you.
Hey, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Esther Sharbit. These 2 paintings were inspired by the Holocaust, which I had to do because I'm Jewish, I'm first-generation American, and my parents came from East Germany escaping World Wars I and II, and many of my relatives were killed during the Holocaust. My work is actually very serendipitous. I work with fluid media and also wax and collage, and the images sometimes just appear to me as I am working. These 2 were probably more thought out than I usually do, but they started out as monoprints. The faces started out as monoprints, and I cut them out and mounted them on canvas and then started working from there. My pieces do have to do with violence, death, mortality, and terror that's around us. This next body of work, again, occurred through serendipity and layering of different media. Sometimes the images appear to me through my use of hot wax, encaustic. And as I manipulate the wax along with paint, the color, the images just appear. And they remind me of other things that are in my thoughts. And I have to say that both of these occurred the same way. I start out with black canvas, and then I work my other media on top of the black, and the images start coming through. Again, these deal with mortality, fear, and things that are going on in the world and in my mind. This trio of paintings were inspired by my love of ornamentation, pattern, and just plain decoration and playing around with media. I discovered this certain paint that comes in a tube and creates this sort of embroidery. And these were inspired by my trips through Turkey and Morocco, patterning in their clothes. And basically, I love the idea of the glittering gold and the different metallic surfaces on black. And again, it's serendipity. I just start doing it, and the paintings just grow out of as I'm doing it.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Cohen-Lange, and this series is called The Conversation, Talking to Ourselves. Where do I start? I think that my work has always been political, and some would say feminist, although I don't really think I just deal with women's issues. It just sort of looks that way sometimes. I believe we live in an echo chamber society where we only talk to people who agree with us. We've become so polarized in this culture that we're afraid to talk to people who disagree with us. We avoid it like the plague. Or if we are faced with people who disagree with us politically, socially, sexually, we talk about the weather because we're too afraid. The work is all cast glass with LED ribbons. The original piece was clay and is an image of my first granddaughter. People ask me, why in the world did you choose a little girl's face to represent the culture? And I'll be damned if I know. I think it's because of the fact that I never had children of my own. So when my husband and I got married and I inherited my stepson, who was 12, many years later I found myself as a grandmother, and I can hardly get over how much fun it is to be a grandmother. So the faces of children are really fascinating to me, which is how Maeve's face, and Maeve now thinks she's famous because she's the face of all these, Maeve's face became the symbol of the culture, and how we just keep repeating ourselves and talking to each other. It's cast glass. I learned how to do cast glass. I'm basically a wood carver, which you can hardly tell by looking at this, but I am. And I started doing cast glass through a workshop I took at Lowell Street Studios, and really found it a fascinating medium. Partially because of the fact that I never know what's going to happen. You make a mold, cut up colored glass, put it in the mold, run it into the kiln, and 2 days later you take it out and you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting. I had no idea that was going to happen. So for somebody who's new at glass, it's really been fun. I wanted to add a conversation of light. And originally I spoke to a neon artist who actually exhibits here sometimes. And she suggested I use these LED ribbons. And they're great fun. They tend to burn out the faces a little bit, but I think the point is gotten across of the circularity of conversation in the culture.
Good afternoon. I'm Linda Sorkin-Eisenberg, and I'm a Chicago artist, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my work. So we'll start right over here. This is my favorite one. The name of this work is called The Garden Party, and it reflects goddesses from Rome and Greek. And actually, the way I do my work, I'm a process artist. I see the materials that I have, and from there, I just take the materials and create. And I knew that these images were going to be figures. I've always worked figuratively, and I love working three-dimensionally. And this was taken from a pattern, a dressmaker pattern. And I used a very, very interesting product that hardens. So what I do is I dip, not all of them, but some of them in this hardener, and it becomes very stiff, and it allows me to drape it around the armatures that I built. So this is the first one that I don't know why I love it so much, but it is my favorite. So I'd like to talk about this one for a minute. This is called This is Goddess of the Hunt. It's called Artemis. And Artemis was made out of blue jean fabric, which I beat in the beater. It's all handmade paper. I beat in the beater for 8 hours. And abaca comes from the banana plant, and it's also with the blue jean material mixed together to give it the color. And what happens, it just shrinks. It shrinks about 50%. So when I did put it on the armature, it kind of just grabbed it. And this is my second favorite, actually. And these are from pillowcases. I cut them out, just the circles. The pillowcases were torn, of course, and I cut them out. And it kind of reminded me of the hunt, or armor, or just being tough. Then I have this one, which is called Hera. And Hera is also made from abaca handmade paper and fabric. And this is Queen of the Gods, is Hera. And she is the goddess of marriage. She's vengeful and a bit jealous, but she stands proud. She's very beautiful. Then I have this one, which is, this one is Aphrodite, and she is the goddess of the earth. And as you see, all of these leaves and sort of earthly objects are in this image. And this one is all fabric. There's no paper. And the armature was from tomato plants. So the tomato plants, the structure is what I used for the armature. And then we go right to this one over here, which is Aphrodite. Beautiful, beautiful, love, sexual, and just lovely. This is also made out of paper and some fabric, and of course these embellishments that I love to use, which are flowers that are made out of fabric. And I think that's about it. I think this is all I'm going to talk about today. But I love doing three-dimensional work. And the theme really made me imagine people from centuries ago sitting around having tea in the garden, and the goddesses were from all over. They just came together through the air, and they sat down or stood up, depending if there was a chair, and they just talked. So I'm going to just say goodbye and thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Andrea Ginsberg. My work is primarily in sculpture. However, I do also very much enjoy painting. Actually, the feelings and thoughts of you, the viewers, are of the most interest to me. This is my Ellis Island series. There are 3 pieces here. My father came to America at approximately age 10 with 5 young brothers and their mother. They came from a village in Russia where they were persecuted because they were Jewish. They needed to escape from the pogroms. It is overwhelming to think about their feelings and needs upon arriving at Ellis Island in 1906. This is Ellis Island 2. Stoneware, aluminum mesh, paper pulp, and altered papers. Next is Ellis Island 3, which is also stoneware. Here we have Eve's Ark, made of terracotta. Here Eve is sheltering life. Old Friends, stoneware with aluminum mesh, paper pulp, altered paper. For myself, the title speaks for the piece. The Uprooted series speaks to the extreme anguish of being uprooted from one's home, family, friends, and homeland. In Uprooted 1, 2, and 3, the figures are stoneware, the structures are aluminum mesh, paper pulp, altered papers, and acrylic paint. In Uprooted 5, the figures again are stoneware. The structure is aluminum mesh with paper pulp, altered papers, and acrylic paint. Uprooted 5 is terracotta. Thank you very much for your interest.
I'm Ellen Koentopp-vanek, and this is Why Do Bad Things Happen on Beautiful Days? It's handmade paper cutouts and gouache on my own handmade flax paper. This piece evolved. The subject determined a new way of working for me. Rita, my friend and neighbor of 30 years, sold her house that she'd lived in for 40 years and had raised her sons in. She didn't know the buyer was going to be tearing the house down. It came down on July 13th, and I spent the entire day documenting. I knew there was going to be a piece in its destruction. When I looked at the photos, they were too graphic and didn't express how I felt, and certainly how I knew Rita felt. I just started thinking about the wrecker, how it moved windows and doors, and how you could see the sky through the roof and the windows. The ceiling fan of the bedroom was visible, even though you could see the sky at the same time. I just started cutting out pieces of the house and moving them around the paper. It was a bit cathartic. I hope when Rita finally gets to see this in person, she'll feel the same way. This is Season's diary. It's gouache on my own handmade flax paper. It's a series of small snapshots, views of my backyard from windows of my house and in the yard. I started it as a challenge to myself because I wanted to work smaller, faster, and looser. I wanted to capture the moment. I think of it as a never-ending series of the mundane things that I see daily. In the process of painting them, they become profane. There is one painting in the group that is of the water at my family's Klinger Lake house. The rest are of my backyard, and it seems as if each day brings a new view. The winter paintings ended up being more detailed and controlled because the light changed so quickly I had to use photographs as well as the view out my window. In the bottom row, I used one of the fall paintings and then created different variations of it. This one is Chicago Skyway. It's mixed media on Mylar. I feel the transparency of Mylar lends an ethereal dimension to the work along with the layering of different drawing and painting materials. I've been painting Chicago's movable bridges for some time. Bridges cross both boundaries, real and metaphoric. These are the lift bridges on the east side of the Chicago Skyway as it crosses the Calumet River. It's the bridge that links my home in Chicago to my family's Klinger Lake house in Michigan. It was a magical place for my children and a refuge for me. I've taken this trip hundreds of times and always watched as we quickly passed the lift bridge trying to figure out just what it was. Finally, one day on a lunch break at Chicago Vocational High School, I drove over to 95th and Calumet to get a good view of the bridge and discovered it was in fact 3 lift bridges. The contrast of bridges over water with nature being pushed back and yet always getting a foothold remind me of man's imposition on our earth and our impact on it. It reminds me that unless we change our ways, this bridge will crumble and nature will be victorious in the end. This is Alley Landscape, and it's acrylic on Mylar. I wake every morning with this post in view. I love to watch how the light reflects off the wires. The scene changes with the seasons and with the time of day as the sun moves from east to west. It's a typical sight in any Chicago alley, a mundane view made profane by its being noticed and recorded. The quality of Mylar adds to the feeling of the passage of time. This is Reflection, oil pastel on my handmade flax paper. It's a close-up of part of the reflection of the tower on the long pier at Montrose Beach. I go there often. I feel like it's my personal refuge when I need a nature fix. This one is May 17th. It's an oil pastel on Andrea Peterson's handmade hay paper. I saw this view out my window and wanted to try capturing its essence on the paper I'd purchased from Andrea. I liked using the rough texture of the paper to complement the bright sunny spring day.
Okay, my name is Lois Long, and I do photography, but I think of myself as painting with the camera. Photography itself means light writing, or maybe light drawing. In my case, I seem to think about it as painting with a camera. A long time ago, I was a painter, got into photography as a means of being able to keep my finger in art, as well as being able to raise a family. So time was very precious. There were things that I wanted to paint, but I didn't have the time to do it. My hand was slow, so photography became the way of working all of this together. In the very beginning, I was looking for my paintings already done. I went out and I did party walls. Party walls are when you have two buildings that are together, you rip one down, you have the remnants of how people lived. And I found my paintings already done. I was into abstract painting, and there they were. However, there came a time when there were always more walls, and I just needed to move on. I was always interested in the idea of illusion and reality, so I introduced the mirror into places that I photographed. But however, with camera equipment, and this is old camera equipment, at some point the camera freezes up. You can't be outside in the wintertime, so I had to move inside, and I took my mirror inside, I added a piece of glass, and all of a sudden I was off on a whole new track. I started thinking about this idea of dualism, of illusion and reality, and how photos themselves are kind of a stand-in. I mean, they're evidence in a trial. They can be the real, they can tell the real story, as we all know today with videos. And so the mirror also is a stand-in for reality. Other materials that I started using were, number one, it was natural daylight. All of this is up to nature. It's a collaboration with the natural light. I don't control the light itself. I use seamless paper because that blots out the background. That's my blank canvas. Again, the idea of painting. And I look for how the natural light shines on it, and then I start to look at how I can work with the light. I'm very interested in using the things we normally get rid of out of our field of vision. Glare, light, shadows. They became my kind of elements of art that I worked with. I started calling it sort of secondary vision because we normally get rid of them out of our field of vision. Okay, working with the light is a collaboration because the light changes, it moves. It visibly moves every 5 minutes or so, where you might pick up the edge of light reflected in the color, and so it's gone within the 5 minutes or so. So this became almost like a performance piece. Somebody even suggested one time that I video it as a performance. The work has always been very multi-layered, and I've thought about them as kind of an installation of light because the light is there for a little while, and I document it in a way. And I've also found out that if there is no light, if you took the light out, if the sun is not there, I'm out of business. If you took the light away from it, there would be nothing. And so the light started taking on a different meaning for me. I started looking at light as the vitality, a sense of life itself. I had a son who asked me one time on an assignment for school to go home and ask his parents what God looked like. I had to think about this one. I used to think God was a bearded old man. I didn't know if God, well, I didn't even think God was a man or a woman. I more or less looked at it as a life force. Like, for instance, if you go to a wake and you see the person in the casket, you see their body, but you don't see them, their spirit, their vitality is gone. And if man is made in the image and likeness of God, what is it? What is that eternal element? What is that vitality? What is that life that reflects that? So I started thinking about the light in a very spiritual and mystical way, so it has taken on an entirely new meaning for me. For instance, this work is called The Spirit Protects Us. Again, it's got the sort of mystery of playing with the light, but this is almost kind of like a dove form, and in many religions, the dove becomes like the Holy Spirit. This one here was from an earlier insight series that is called a choral insight. In other words, when the light goes on in the head, you have the insight, and I had a whole series of pictures that were the insight series. This one here is called Nuance, and it harkens back to watercolor painting, and the parts that I really, really liked about it were the very subtle shadings of color that suggested the watercolor. This one here is called Healing Meditation. And again, there's the suggestion of looking at the spiritual in it, and the idea that the light can become very nurturing and very healing. This one here is called Dynamic Opalescent Mystery. And the reason for that is it is mysterious, it is dynamic, and it has a kind of an opalescence about it. This is called Revelry. This is thinking back maybe about all of this.
Hello, my name is Betty Ann Mochek. I'm an artist and I'm also a professor of art at Concordia University, Chicago. I'm going to share a few of my works with you today, many of them inspired by a recent sabbatical in New York City. But the works aren't about New York City per se, they're about the American city, the individual, the crowd, the repetition of elements and principles of design. I want to begin with this photograph. This is a new medium for me, photography. And this was a back view scene from my apartment on the Upper West Side, 71st and Broadway. The repetitive windows and the shadows, the red, it inspired me a great deal, and I have a number of works that I created from this particular muse that I'd like to share with you. But this is a large piece, and it's called Rear View Day, an archival inkjet. This particular piece is called Windows in Browns and Reds. It's pastel and spray paint. And again, it's grappling with that same behind the window scene. You can see the repetitiveness of the windows, but especially the kind of shadow that casts as day is at night. A lot of spray painting goes on here, pastel and such, but I'll put down actual pieces of paper here and there, and I'll lay it in a spray booth and spray can paint it. A lot like tagging, except working on canvas and not on buildings. This particular piece is called Windows with Shadows. It's graphite, and what that means is, think of a pencil and take the shavings from a pencil, it becomes dust. You can work it directly onto the canvas, and it's an actual floor cloth canvas, or you can take some water and a brush, and you create a little slurry, and it gets very energetic and becomes almost like watercolor, but it's graphite. Again, dealing with a close-up. It's called Windows with Shadows, day and night, I think of. And again, dealing with some of that reminiscence of the back view scene, the buildings, water tower in the back, and the black and white is really the way I see a lot of the urban environment. This is Gold Medal at Night, mixed media on board. The exciting thing about this is it's urban, but it's influenced actually by the gold medal flower plant or grain elevators in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which has now been turned and designated into a museum. But when you leave the Guthrie Theater at night, there's this haunting view of this. And it inspired me so much that obviously I took some photographs and then, of course, made it my own by adding some additional this and that as you do. But it's a haunting scene that I think evokes a real sense of emotion that you can only get in an urban setting. Water Tower in Browns is a mixed media on Yupo paper, which is a kind of almost plastic type of watercolor paper, and it handles transparency really well. Again, spray paint was used, charcoal, some pastel, mixed media, and it's dealing with that juxtaposed sense of structure, building, water towers. Speaking of water towers, this particular grouping of water towers shows my love of that image. I guess about 15 years ago, running art studios in Greektown, Chicago, the view that we had on the 10th floor showed the many, many water towers in the city. Unfortunately, so many have been taken down. I had to go to New York to see more. There's 12,000 to 17,000 in Manhattan, and I just have fallen in love with that particular symbol of the city. The middle piece here, in particular, is drawing with X-Acto knife, really. It's a cut paper stencil, and you don't have to have a pencil to draw, and I love sometimes just cutting out shapes and imagery. And that's what that is. The original intent, though, of using that was to do the print up above, which is an actual rolled ink through that particular stencil, and it creates the image above. I ended up liking that image and then liking the stencil so much that I thought I'd go back, roll ink onto it, and do some rubbing. And of course, I think that piece, and it holds its own, so it had to be in the show. And you can see that it's a paper kind of cutout. Below is Tower Scribble, and that shows a little bit of the remnants of that same paper stencil print, very lightly in the background, just to get that sense. But then on top, acrylic paint stick was used to scribble very energetically in an abstract way the same imagery, grappling and re-grappling, digesting it. So, and I called that one, well, it's Tower Scribble, but it also takes a long time to be able to do something like that, I think, to be so free and energetic, and very exciting to do for me. Crosswalk Bicyclist is probably more reminiscent of a lot of things that I had been doing and kind of meshing them into some of this newer work. It shows a particular scene and yet the energy and the busyness of that everyday life, from the hanging clothes to the street life and then people. I love the concept of, the urban American city. You can either be an individual or you can be in a crowd. It depends on what you want to do. And that's what I find really exciting and very meaningful about this city. So this obviously shows the crowd, and it's Crosswalk Bicyclist. These works are about the American city. They were influenced by New York and a sabbatical time, but they're not about New York per se. They're about the great American city. And I think the concept of energy, the individual, the group, the crowd, the architecture, mixed media, drawings, and even moving into photography as well as video, which we have to walk over to too. But it's about the life and the pulse of the American city and its people. They're not your typical over-the-couch skyline scenes. They aren't meant to be. I hope you can smell the city, any city in this show, these pieces, and feel the pace, the energy, and the truths that my work tries to truly reveal. So I'm still fascinated with line, sure, probably more influenced now by shadow, capturing that explosion of glimpses and things you pass by, busyness, light, architecture, unreachable, implied street life, muted palette, sense of place, ambiguity, which rhythm, whose perspective. This is a very exciting new medium for myself. Actually, I co-created it with Adam Walker, and Adam happens to be my husband. We created the many, many films and sounds, and there is sound to this, which you're not seeing by, just seeing it on the little camera here. But we created kind of a less than 5-minute essence, so a bit of a romance in a way of urbanness.
My name is Sharon Pierce, and the title of my series is called Healing Matters. And after recent surgery and then a traumatic loss in my life, I started doodling and using the doodles to come back to working with clay again. And also other symbols in my pieces that I used in my pieces as a metaphor for life-giving affirmation, which became a healing process for me. I've always been fascinated by line and texture and the tactile experience, which is in the nature of the clay, which is soft and sensuous, pliable and earthy. That guides me as I allow the forms of my art to give voice to complex dreams and visions. And some are doodles, and then I would go into some of the other pieces, the owls and the frog, and some of the other pieces have meaning to me as a metaphor in my life. Perhaps that is why I view working with clay as a sensual experience. To me, clay is more versatile, the most versatile of sculpting mediums. While working with clay, the hand is literally imprinted in the clay. Not only does the medium allow a revelation of the artist's soul, it also reveals the hand that brings the artist's work into being through skill, desire, and imagination. And what is most fulfilling is when viewers themselves sense the spirit in my work, when it speaks to them and they recognize something about themselves. And the title for my series is Healing Matters, or it could be Healing Matters.
My name is Miriam Sokoloff. So I'm going to start by quoting an Allen Ginsberg poem that I think speaks to my work. Let the mercy of the flower's direction beckon the eye. Let the straight flower bespeak its purpose and straightness to seek the light. Let the crooked flower bespeak its purpose and crookedness to seek the light. Let the crookedness and the straightness bespeak the light. Allen Ginsberg, 1956. So these are plein air paintings that I did in the Michigan Dunes, close to Lakeside, Michigan, close to the Galen River, and close to Saugatuck. And I call that landscape of the Michigan Dunes the landscape of my heart. It's been a place that I've gone to since I was a little girl. As a child, my cousins and I explored those woods and dunes with complete freedom that certainly would not be possible today for children. And I've returned to that landscape over and over throughout my life, and it's been a great source of inspiration. Now, one of my artistic obsessions, I would say, is gesture in both figure drawing, and you can't find a better topic for gesture than dunes, grass, and the woods, because it's in a constant state of movement and beautiful gestural lines. So what I do is I walk through the woods and the dunes, and I find a spot that I will call my subject, and I set up an easel and start to paint, and I stay there. I might return on a second day as the light changes, or I might just keep going straight through with notes as to light. So this is a painting called Where the Woods Begin. And, you know, everything is discovered as I walk through the woods, and I just park myself and work there. My general MO is to try to respond to and paint every blade of grass and twig and leaf that I see. This painting is a little bit different. It was done after I came back from Japan, and I think I brought back with me a more minimalist approach, but that didn't last long, and I reverted back to drawing every blade of grass and leaf and twig that I encounter to the best of my ability. This is a pastel, and all of my paintings in this show of the Michigan Dunes are painted on paper. They're either painted with acrylic on paper or they're mixed media, acrylic and pastel, and in this case this is a pastel. And sometimes a subject is so expansive that I will put two pieces of paper together so that I can create a larger painting. This is another pastel. It's the riverbank on the edge of the Galen River outside of Union Pier, Michigan, and that is a very, very beautiful spot, full of wildflowers in the late summer and just full of light and movement. Capturing the landscape can be overwhelming. There is a lot going on there, and you have to take a deep breath and try and nail it. Another painting on the banks of the Galen River outside of Union Pier, Michigan. And water has always been something of a mystery to me, how to capture it. It's in constant motion. It's even more challenging to me than grass and twigs and leaves in motion. So I figured this is something I have to get a grip on, and I really enjoyed making this painting. And here are two gouaches on paper. They're acrylic gouache on paper. This one is called Gold Grass, and it's my attempt to capture the movement of the little tips of dune grass that turn gold at the top and are a kind of a deep red at the bottom, and just kind of twinkle and sparkle as the light hits them. And this is also a gouache on paper. It has some of the same dunes grass tips happening in it, but I also came upon some beautiful wildflowers, blue wildflowers, and they were a very, very brilliant sapphire blue. So those are my 7 paintings that are in this show, and I was very, very happy to be part of this show with my colleagues, 10 Chicago women artists.
I'm Rebecca Wolfram. I'm a member of this group that has a show in this beautiful gallery, and the group over the years has been super encouraging and helpful. I would like to just take you on a tour of some of these drawings. So this is a triptych, and I'm going to use the word stratification a lot talking about these drawings because everything is stratified, so each one has its top part, and it has its middle part, and it has its bottom part. The middle part, each one has a sort of an interior space separated from an exterior space, and the border between the interior and the exterior is permeable, so that creatures and elements can travel between the interior and the exterior. In the top part, the top strata of these drawings, you probably will identify more human-related elements. And you might find that the tone of them is perhaps not so positive. This may remind you, and rightly so, of a sewer system, for example. We tend to think of things moving from the bottom to the top, but in one way, if you think about plants, plants grow with their shoots growing up, but their roots growing down. So the relationship of up and down is not entirely clear. So this is an oil pastel drawing, and it has to do with stages. This also has stratification top to bottom going on, but it also has 3 different stages or sections. And in the first, we're reading left to right, the first section almost cartoonishly is depicting a sort of paradise phase. So this perhaps is more about stratification of time, because you think about time also, if you go back in time, think about it in terms of going down. So the earliest time would be on the left, and then the middle section seems to be indicating where some elements are corrupting the paradise that started. Salamanders, I think, are a very interesting animal because they're one of the very earliest animals to emerge from the water, and they haven't changed that much in a long time, and they're kind of an elemental animal, which is probably why I tend to use them a lot. In the third section, there's it's pretty much a scene of desolation and destruction. You can see for yourself if the human element in this is a more benign or a more malign force in the universe. Interpretation of the black sludgy pipe that people are hauling as if it's maybe almost a religious object or a ceremonial act. And this is also an oil pastel drawing.
That's perfect. Then you right here. Okay, I think you got it.
This is my friend Mika. Thank you for coming. Hi. No tummies. No tummies. Go sideways. Go sideways. Okay, now what do I do? Go sideways. Wait, are we moving? Hold on.